Hi everyone, I'm Tim Elliott, and I'm just sending you this video in case you couldn't make it to a brand and culture strategy. So I'm excited to be sharing these ideas really with a double header Innovation Friday and Hope to Grow alumni event. So I'm going to deliver a whistle-stop tour of the two big ideas, two of my favorite topics in business, actually, and ones I've been personally working in and around for around 25 years. So today we're going to explore brand and culture. Two words that are very much interwoven in the world of business. Culture, in fact, can be described as how brand shows up in the world through the behaviors and beliefs and actions of your people. So, question I want to ask you to mull over as I talk about this next bit is, how do you define brand? If you were to write a definition to yourself in the notebook in front of you, what is your definition of brand? The definition I love to use is the meaning people attach to you and your offer. The meaning people attach to you and your offer. You see, brand is how we understand, describe, and manage the meaning attached to the work we do. So this is a brilliant definition for me, and one that I've tried to tweak and improve over the years and keep on coming back to it. So when I say brand, this is what I want you to keep in your mind. So quickly on to brand strategy. And there are four big brand strategy questions that you can see on the screen. We've got why do you exist beyond making money? Who do you choose to serve? How are you going to show up? And what exactly are you going to do? The big how question contains the second topic of the day, culture. And we're going to look at these in more detail. We're going to just uncover a little bit more depth and ingredients of each of these things. So hopefully you can go away from today's session and apply them into your business. So this is the big why question. It's the very start point. Why do you exist beyond making money? Making money is always a result. It's always a result of doing other things well, like meeting the needs of people, solving problems, or walking towards, or the big kind of environmental and social challenges we face. So do you have an answer of this question right now? I'd be interested to know. In brand, it's important that we not only understand but communicate this thing clearly. So this could be done by packaging this meaningful, right? The thing at the heart of our brand, this meaning up in various forms and functions. We've got vision, mission, and values, which I'm sure you've all heard of, a purpose statement, a brand manifesto, rules of engagement, and promises. It doesn't really matter which set of packaging, which set of language you choose, but it's important you do have one, because this is the vehicle to help the big why stick in the minds of the people you choose to serve. Let's have a look at a few examples just to make that super clear. First up, Patagonia. I'm sure you've all heard of Patagonia and the recent news about giving all of their company profits to the planet, to the good of the planet. The reason why these are an example is because they do vision and mission and values super well. So we've got the vision and mission there, which are pretty standard, right? They're good versions of that and not to understand. But why I've really picked this example is on the right-hand side of your screen in the white box. We've got the values. And why these are such good examples of values is because they use not single words, but phrases, and then own their definition. And this is where a lot of organizations get this stuff wrong, right? They pick a single word: creativity, trust, innovation, and they don't define it. They don't define what it means to them, which, when we're looking to manage the meaning people attach to us and our offer, like the definition of brand, when we're doing the work of brand management and branding, we don't go to the depths of defining what exactly we mean. It's about us, what we mean when we say this word, this phrase. And that's what we want you to understand about our business. And these are a great example about that. Next up is a purpose statement. And again, a really well-known company, just for the simple fact that it's a simple statement and it's easy to understand. They've done it well. Now, I've been working in purpose and brand purpose for ages, and have made purpose statements for companies that are really good. Personally, I can't figure it out for myself, although I hope to be a purposeful individual doing work that matters. But for me, it's much more of a feeling. So this may or may not be for you. Like I say, these are a selection of tools, a selection of packaging that will help you communicate this big why question. Next up, we've got a brand manifesto. Again, a super popular, super broad company, but a great example of a manifesto. So how I like to explain manifesto is a statement of intent, right? A statement of what you're going to do in the world, the change you're going to make, how you're going to act, right? It's got good energy, it's powerful, it's intentional. And these guys do it really well. Nike really do it super well. So maybe a brand manifesto feels like your company. Maybe you're fighting a good fight. Maybe you're trying to change something in the world, and this will be the right way that you can explain it, the story you can tell. Next up, we've got rules of engagement. Now, rules of engagement are values driven. This particular set of rules were for a sustainability think tank I did some work with before Christmas, I think, and this is because it was a global community based. These are the rules of engagement they've chosen, right? How people understand what they're about, right? How it feels to be part of this community. Right, so rules of engagement, maybe you're community based, maybe having a simple set of rules or actions or something like this on school that help people understand what it means to be part of your community and what you're fighting for and what you're standing for and against is super important. But this is an interesting little rule I wanted to pop on there. And finally, promises. So this is my personal favorite. Not that that's important, but I love the words I promise, because no matter what experience, age, ethnicity, gender, background, we all understand the words I promise and what it means to break one. So if you're brave enough as a brand to create a promise or a series of promises that explain and describe and help people understand this big why, right? The stuff that drives you, then I think this is a really kind of powerful way. I'd be interested to know if any of these styles of packaging appeal to you, or if you use any already in your organizations, or indeed are attached to brands that you buy from, that you shop from, that appeal to you, that you know of. Or if you've got any other examples, would be super interesting as well. So moving swiftly on to the next big strategy question. Who do you choose to serve? The big who question. Understanding who it is you choose to serve, whose problems you're solving, whose needs you're meeting, who you're fighting for is super important. Again, there are ingredients here that I've put in the bottom of, you can see on the bottom left of your screen. Some ingredients, some little tools, some methodologies to help you answer this question are to understand who your ideal customer is. Understand your category, your market, your segments, and your targets. We're going to come to ideal customer in a minute because I've got a little exercise, a point of interaction for us to do. But let me just explain category, market, segment, and targets. So I'm going to use another super well-known brand, Starbucks, to describe this. So the category of Starbucks, right? The broadest definition of audience Starbucks want to serve are coffee drinkers. Right? Everybody who drinks coffee is potentially somebody Starbucks would choose to serve. Every coffee drinker in the world, but it's an awful lot of people. You certainly, even with Starbucks budget, I imagine, don't want to reach every coffee drinker in the world. It's a big cost per click. So you define that by another level and you go for market. Who's your actual market? Let's define that category a little more to make it a bit more feasible, a bit more tangible. So the market for Starbucks are the out-of-home coffee drinker. Because I don't know about you. And yes, I know they've started to do Starbucks at home stuff, but we'll ignore that for a second, just for this example. They're the out-of-home coffee drinker because primarily they want people who drink coffee when they're out of home and knocking around in the world and away from a kettle. They want to choose Starbucks to get their coffee. Right. So the out-of-home coffee drinker is a market. It's a subdivision of all coffee drinkers, which is their category. So next we've got segments and targets. Those of you who are Help to Grow alumni will recognize these from module 5, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. They're very much the same thing. So segmentation are a few definitions, getting a bit more specific about the market we choose to serve, right? For example, again, with Starbucks, you might have the commuters, the people who are going into office in the morning and they want one of those giant coffees, a venti, I think it is, a litre of coffee to power them through a dull, rainy Tuesday morning in the office. You've also got maybe the lunchtime crowd, people who want a quick snack and another litre of coffee to power them through this afternoon. You may have leisure users like people who are shopping or having meetings or freelancers or just caught between, between places and want a place to kind of relax and catch up on emails and eat some cake. So you've got those three segments: leisure users, lunchtimers, commuters, for example, right? That are segments. Now we're getting pretty detailed. We can start to imagine that we can craft very specific messages for these people, even do campaigns towards them, right? To encourage them to use us more in their desired time, to make a very specific proposition. There's one more definition left. Even more specific is targeting, right? You've got to think of these are the people you're hunting, right? You need to be specific enough that if you were using a spear, you would hit them with a point. So again, using Starbucks, we'll look at commuters who are commuting into Canary Wharf to go to Canary Wharf tube station before 9 a.m. on a Tuesday to get a free Danish with their coffee. So super specific. Still out-of-home coffee drinkers, still coffee drinkers, still commuters of the segment, but now you're being very specific, right? You can create a very compelling proposition for these people that help them take definitive action as a sense of them. Right. So when you're answering who do you choose to serve, it's good for you personally to understand and have defined category, market, segments, and targets. There is another one on there I said I'd come back to, and I'll do that right now. The ideal customer. This is a task for you I want you to do. As I waffle on for the next minute, I want you to think about being able to introduce me to your ideal customer. This is a great exercise. And it needs to be done in such a way that you recognize them if you walk in the room. So yes, things like demographics and firmographics are important, but think personality, think behavior drivers, think beliefs, think preferences, think values, think needs. I've got a really good story about this. I call the loads of Jasons story. So I did this exercise with a company, an engineering and manufacturing company, actually, some time ago. And they'd never really described the ideal customer, right? And they did this and they drew a picture, they doodled what they'd look like, they went through all sorts of details, what other brands these people would like, and they called them Jason. And I got a phone call a couple of weeks later of their commercial sales director who went to a big trade show and exhibition for their industry. And he rang me up from the car on the way home, super excited. He didn't even introduce himself to the call. He just went, "Oh my God, there were loads of Jasons, loads of them. I mean, Jasons from all over the place. Amazing, like a room full of Jasons." And that's what I mean, right? You should spend time and energy and money finding your ideal customer. Yes, it doesn't mean you won't gather and you won't collect and you won't acquire other people who don't quite meet this profile. But if you don't define your ideal customer, right, how can you target them? How can you go to a point of understanding? How can you communicate to them most effectively? So it's a really interesting exercise, and I've used it for many moons, and I hope it might be something you can take into your organizations and do with your colleagues. If you want to send me a description of your ideal customer, also open for that. So a bit of an intermittent slide now. There are two sides to this brand thing. There's truth at the center of your business, why you do it, why you care, and why other people should care too, which we've just looked at. And it's consisted and made up of the why and the who questions. And there's how you prove it true, which we're coming to next. This is how you show up and what actions you take. So brand is a question of truth and proof. So let's get on with that. It's the big how time now, folks. How are you going to show up? This is where culture comes into the mix under how you're going to show up. This helps us understand how our brand experience defines our employee experience and customer experience. Today, we're going to focus on culture because of the topic of the situation, and not the experience equation side so much. But if you want to talk about that, I'm available afterwards. So we're going to focus on culture and how your people need to show up at work to deliver the customer experience your brand promises in its marketing. There are ingredients to effective culture here, right? There's speeches, stories, ceremonies, and symbols. And again, I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to unpack those ingredients a little more just for the remaining minutes of this session. So the first ingredients of communicating and manifesting an effective culture are speeches. So when I say speeches, I mean a short message designed to inform or educate. They are clarity-inducing communications. Your definitions, they're what you mean when you say that phrase or that value or that word. So have a think now. What are some of those common phrases that show up for you in your work? My first boss used one, and if you've got kids in the room listening to this, which would be a bit weird, maybe block their ears for this one. My first boss used to say, "Tim, business is like sex. You get out what you put in. And that's kind of stuck with me through the time, right? So what are these common phrases? What do you use? What phrases are on repeat by you and your team that are meaningful to your culture, that mean something in your office? Next up, we have stories. Now, stories are meaning making. If you remember the definition of brand, the meaning people attach to you and your offer, this is storytelling is a massive part of that, actually, but also story is really important internally when we're talking about brand internally. It's the narrative that surrounds those ideas and values and phrases and makes them meaningful to the recipient. So employees, potential employees, colleagues, co-workers. So stories are here to inspire and motivate people to take action. Where speeches, again, inform and educate so they understand. It's not enough. Knowledge and information alone don't change anything. We need to make it meaningful. And narrative and stories, packaging around those ideas. Anecdotes are amazing at this and a real simple version, right? So have a think. What kind of anecdotes do you use at work to prove this is how you show up, to prove you live this value? If I were to ask you what your 1 or 2 core values were in your company, I bet you've got an anecdote of how it shows up, or I'd hope so. Next up is ceremonies. Ceremonies are there to kind of activate and celebrate commitment to values, to virtues, to beliefs and actions within your company. So have a think now. What are repeatable ceremonies or actions in your organization, in your culture? I've seen these both as onboarding, onboarding customers, onboarding employees, these processes. Things like how you choose to celebrate birthdays or successes of your team, so team bonding. We've got employee experience ceremonies like work anniversaries and again, maybe performance celebrations. So what are these sort of things? What ceremonies do you have on repeat in your culture, in your organizations that go to become one of these foundational ingredients of culture? Have a think. Last one of these ingredients is symbols. Now, symbols show up in many forms. They can be visual, they can be auditory, environmental, or physical. Remember, not all communication is written. And in fact, that there was some mind-blowing stat that I can't remember, which I really should note down for these sort of things, of the percentage of communication we receive as people and how much only, like, what small amount of it is actually written. So symbols in culture and in brand act as reminders. They are distinctive, they're meaningful and memorable. Yes, they can be logos, but they can be badges, they can be colors, they can be slogans, all sorts of things, right? How do they show up, right? Is it a particular room that you have? It can be environmental or physical, remember. So those of you who work in offices, like, how does it show up in there, right? What does it mean when we're in that space? Do you have a quiet room? Do you have a focus room? What's the canteen designed to do? Do you have fluffy bean bags in the shape of sausage dogs? I don't know why I said that, but you can have it. So these are symbols, right? And these are the ingredients of culture. So we've got speeches, stories, ceremonies, and symbols, right? These are the things that go to creating a meaningful culture, to getting people to understand how you're expected to show up as a worker for this brand. That leaves us one final question, I'm sure you will have noticed, the big what question. This is the planning bit. What exactly are you going to do? All this intentional strategic thought is great, but it's got to be implemented. I know it's boring. but it has. You need a plan of action. Now, there are many, 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 many planning frameworks and tools and apps. Your job is to choose one that works for you and your team and your organization. I'm just going to share two quick kind of overviewing ideas before we have a proper Q&A and I end the session. So the first one is clear next steps. Simple and effective. A big hat tip to Dale, a formal, even not a formal, commercial sales director I worked with many moons ago, who introduced this concept to our teams, which I hated at the time, but now technically runs my life and shows up in stuff like this. So clear next step. There are rules. It has to be clear. It has to be specific. Can you explain it in a sentence? It needs to be able to be done next. Have you got everything in hand that you need to do it? And it has to be able to step you forward. It has to be tangible and measurable and matter. So clear next steps, dead simple. Next up, and the final proper information slide for me is horizons. So this comes up from the world of innovation strategy. And the idea behind horizons is that every company should have a view, a strategic view of 3 horizons. You have horizon 1, which is the closest horizon, usually around 3 to 6 months, but no more, right? Because it's represented by the most amount of dots on this slide, because it should be the most detailed, because it comes now, because you're in it, right? You're working towards horizon 1 right now. You're both feet in. You should have a pretty detailed perspective of what you need to do next and tomorrow and next week. Next up is horizon 2. Horizon 2 is usually, let's say, 12 to 18 months after horizon 1. Right now, there should be a good amount of detail. You should know or have a picture of what should be true within this stage, but it's not as detailed as horizon 1, because if things may change over horizon 1, things may look a little bit different if everything goes to plan in horizon 1. And then you've got horizon 3. This is the biggie, the long-term view, right? This is the North Star. There's less detail here, but it's pointing you in the right direction, right? It's directional. It's helping you choose what needs to happen in terms of your getting to your North Star or traveling in that direction. So these are 3 horizons: short term, middle term, long term. Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Those 2 ideas help you plan. Like, what needs to be true? What do we need to do in horizon to get us to horizon 1? If everything goes well, what needs to be true to get us to horizon 2? If all goes well, what needs to be true to get us to horizon 3? Simple planning structure. And that's it from me. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you're watching this video. There's a call to connect on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer chat.